I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Anatomy of a Movie. We're talking today EX3. What does that mean? The Expendables 3. I am your host, Phil Svitek, and joined alongside, I have...
Demetri Panos. Hello, movie fans.
We're becoming quite the dynamic duo.
I like it.
For the movies that not everyone wants to cover here on the full panel, or they just don't have time to see, they just leave to us, and we're getting quite a good rapport.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I hope everybody else feels the same way, but I feel the bonding. It's a buddy cop film, like sort of kind of. I'm getting too old for this shit.
For this panel, we should actually have like 20 people.
Oh God, yes. Why not?
We should. I mean, the movie stars more people than you count on your hand.
And some of those people who ended up in the poster or in the movie for like 3 minutes. I actually had a friend of mine looked at the credits and go, I didn't realize that Robert Davi was in the movie. Go, he's in the freaking poster. He goes, when was he in the movie? And I'm like, he was in the movie in that scene with Mel Gibson when they're the first siege when they go to take Mel Gibson, and he was the guy making the deal with Mel Gibson. And he's literally in the movie for 3 minutes, but he made it onto the poster. So that's what it's like to be friends, I guess, with Stallone.
I don't want that to be a knock on Stallone. I think, well, let's start with this. For me, I love the spirit of, let's go down the history lane of the Expendables
absolutely.
and talk about the franchise as a whole. Then we'll get specifically into Expendables 3, because for me, the spirit of what the Expendables really is, I just love. And Stallone puts so much of his heart and effort into all of it. And, I don't mind him wanting to do franchise movies. He has a big famous quote where he says, TV shows, they get seasons, and within seasons there's at least 13 episodes, right, for the most part. So you get to really follow a character. And so he wants to do that with movies, which is why there's so many Rockies, Rambo, and now this. But why did we fall in love with the Expendables, Demetri?
Well, it's funny that you should ask, and thank you for asking. I actually got to work with the Expendables. I was at Lionsgate. It was actually one of the last movies I got to work with, and so to me, it is a little bit near and dear to my heart because, okay, number one, it was the first time ever you were getting a cast like this into a Dirty Dozen-ish kind of a movie. Add to that, it was the first time ever in film history where you had Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis in a movie, in a scene for the first time ever. First time ever it was in the Expendables. And the way that Lionsgate marketed the picture was, this is a throwback to those great 80s action movies. Sylvester Stallone wrote it, he directed it, so you felt like you were in good hands because he got it. And of course, Schwarzenegger and Willis, no stranger to stardom of being action heroes in the 80s, they all played along. They played in the sandbox. And then Stallone was wise in bringing in these other folks like Terry Crews, Randy Couture, and then he brings in his buddy Dolph Lundgren, who went off to B-movie heaven in the 80s by doing movies like The Punisher and such. But, you brought all these people back. You added some new faces. Jason Statham was really hot at the time as well. You put together a team, and we were talking about this beforehand. There was a passion into making this movie and making it right. And working in marketing and distribution and exhibitor relations, I got to do presentations in front of, heads of marketing for theater chains and such. And I was really proud, and it was so much fun to have the Expendables on my reel. And I could, when I say first time ever, Schwarzenegger, Willis, Stallone in one scene, everybody was like, yeah. And they got it. And it was just so great. And then when you see the movie, as we were talking about, you could see the passion that was put into the movie. And Stallone really took great care into making sure that the audiences, young and old, were going to get it. If you were young, like if you were well beyond those and you hadn't really caught up with a lot of those movies, you would have a good time. If you were a little bit older, you got it. And
You got the references, absolutely.
And you just smiled from ear to ear. And the action ended up being really kick-ass. It was like a lot of the times they weren't doubling the actors with stunt people. They were doing them themselves, and you could tell. You know, and for the first time, too...
And they played to their age.
They did play to their age. And they didn't go overboard, though. I always got the first Expendables, it was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, here, we're going to throw this in. It's going to be sly. Okay, all pun intended there. But it was really, but it was fun. And in Lionsgate history, it was the first movie to reach that $100 million mark that was a Lionsgate-produced movie. So there was a great pride because it took a while, like, for there to be a big movie like that. And Expendables was just great. It was a ton of fun to work with, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And
you know, to me, what I find so interesting, Sylvester Stallone is so instrumental in all this, and he doesn't mind sharing camera time. And one of the main reasons why I say that is, for me, as great as Stallone is and all these other people, it's Jason Statham who does the bulk lifting of these movies in terms of the acting.
Oh, I agree.
You know,
I agree.
he really and Stallone trusts him to put it on his shoulders, and I think Jason, he's gone along with it, and he's accepting of the role of that role.
And the other great thing too, I'll go back talking about Expendables. The first one is everyone got their day in the sun, including like the bad guy, including Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like nobody. There wasn't a character there. Everybody got to do and play to their strengths, including Jason Statham. And, some people criticized, though, they had the love story with Jason Statham and Charisma, the very beautiful Charisma Carpenter was his girlfriend. But I like that part of the story because it showed a little bit of the knighthood, the chivalry that he had when he beat those people up in the basketball court. Yeah. And I really, I actually enjoyed it. And I think a lot of that's lacking in Expendables 3, but it's one of the things where that movie, look, is it high art? Absolutely not, but can you watch it and have fun, especially if you're going to be throwing back to things? And let's face it, even though it's about 5 minutes of screen time, when Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Willis are on screen together, and they're not even throwing punches, they're just throwing barbs. And you're just like, oh, that was really cool, and it left you wanting more.
And I think part of it was there's that sense of realism because I think they're really, they were throwing jabs at each other. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the reasons why they haven't been on screen before is it's just too much firepower all in one movie, and you can't have. It's like, okay, well, no, I'm the bigger star. No, I'm the bigger star. And
don't forget, I believe it's the three of them that were partners in Planet Hollywood. So growing up in the 80s and watching those movies and seeing these big icons, there was always like links, and even in certain movies like I think it was Last Action Hero, Schwarzenegger in one scene is in a video store and there was a cardboard cutout of Stallone, and he walks up to the cardboard cutout and he does something like this and he like walks away. It makes a In the 80s, at least, you got the sense that they were on a friendly basis, even though for box office-wise, they were competitors. But you always wondered, man, it would be great if Stallone and Schwarzenegger could be in a movie, or Willis and Stallone, or Willis and Schwarzenegger, any combination. But Expendables gave you all three. And it was, again, when I did these presentations, and I got to say that, and I always saved Expendables for last, everybody got it. And very excited. So I think there's a reason for its success. Plus, overseas, these guys are international stars overseas. So,
and action is the most translatable.
Absolutely. And they're just so beloved. Stallone himself, too. I also got to work with the Rambo movie that he did. Mm-hmm. And again,
the fourth one?
The fourth one. And again, he just put his passion into it. He didn't want to screw it up. He delivered for the fans. He made it rated R, and he made a good John Rambo story. So, so I was fortunate in that Lionsgate era when they were building themselves up as a studio. I was very fortunate to be there and have Expendables be one of the last movies that I got to work together with, because it was just so much fun. And I remember the first time seeing it, just having a blast. And I think I ended up seeing it 3 times in the theaters that summer. So, yeah, it was a good time. Yeah.
Definitely a lot. So that was Expendables 1, and I would share those sentiments. We got so much. I love the motorcycles, the planes, the knives, everything. Obviously the action. So really, it took on it gave it such life.
Absolutely.
And then Expendables 2. Actually, I don't know. Whatever your thoughts are, I know you didn't like it as much as the first. I enjoyed it, but I know behind the scenes there was that element of, oh, the first one was successful. Now people wanting to glom onto it. I'm like, oh, we can make a paycheck out of this. But luckily for me, there may have been elements of that, but it didn't tear out of the screen and into me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Expendables 2 is a little bit of a letdown. Number one, I think it should be noted that Stallone didn't direct Expendables 2. His fingerprints are all over it, and he didn't direct Expendables 3, but yet you could tell that it's his project. Had a heavy hand in the writing of it. I think it's almost like in Expendables 2, they almost had too much fun in writing the script. They were too self-referential. Like, we're in the first one, the jokes weren't played like huge. Like, it was done sporadically, and it wasn't done.
What was the Hasta la Vista line in the second, right?
Well, for me,
towards the end when everything's just going
right,
and everyone's just in that whatever the base and everyone's shooting
at each other.
Just so much chaos, so much and just so much happening all at the same time, and that's when the jokes really just. It's like, hey, if we didn't get it in by now, let's get it in. And then, you got Chuck Norris was in it, which was a big deal. But yet they threw in so many, there were at least, if memory serves, at least 3 references. Oh, he's a lone wolf. Oh, the lone wolf is leaving, or he doesn't play with the pack. And it's just like, okay, I got it the first time. It was sort of funny. The second and third time, not so much. And then they tried to bring in a little bit of they wanted to freshen it up, so they brought in Liam Hemsworth, to come in, and he was basically a red shirt. And to me, the best parts of Expendables 2 weren't when they were self-referencing each other. It was when like with Bruce Willis, all the firefights going on, and Bruce Willis is going to pick up Schwarzenegger, and he picks him up in like a Fiat. And Schwarzenegger's like, I have shoe boxes bigger than this. Like, what? And he rips that to me was funny. Everything that was self-referential, it just seemed like almost like, hey, we got Jean-Claude Van Damme here, and hey, we're just a bunch of buddies making a movie together. And, don't worry about the young guy, because he dies he dies like not even halfway through the movie. He gets killed off, and he's the impetus for the rest of the movie. And I don't know. It lost some of its charm to me. It wasn't as fun watching Expendables 2, and I only watched it that one time, and for the most part forgot about it until Expendables 3. Well, I didn't, I don't have Expendables 2 to me isn't. I'm not as strong against it as you perhaps were. I did enjoy it, and then now we're on to the third one.
The Dependables, as I called it and tweeted it out to my 3 people who follow me still. No, I don't know.
Well, so let's the overall impression of the third movie.
Well,
I guess I could start. I mean, what I always like and what gets me to these movies is their marketing is so simple. It's here's a little bit of action and look at all the names we got.
Sure.
It's like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I get behind it. And obviously this time around we got, new faces, we got younger faces.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea of that. Okay, how I to me, the Expendables, I love the idea of mercenaries. And there's video games and things like that, but it's kind of like almost a fantastic idea of mercenaries. Here's a I can't really say realistic portrayal of mercenaries, yeah. But it's a fun portrayal. it's more down to earth portrayal, you know, and there's a brotherhood, and it's just a guy movie. The only parts of it to me is that it became almost some systemic in the sense of, okay, we're gonna do some action, we're gonna get hurt, we're gonna bond, we're gonna cheers beers, and say a couple of jokes. And that was the formula, that was the system, and you know, now we can just rotate people in and out and kind of tell different jokes, and we can introduce them through the jokes. So that became the thing of like, he's got whatever the case may be, and
he's crazy,
you know, and part of the magic to me, you know, I don't mind if we took away some people. I know we're trying to get everyone in, but I want to be able to revel when they're on screen. You know, don't just give me 10 seconds of it. Let's make a historic moment.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh, we just made a moment.
I agree with you. And again, you know, just going back to what I said about the Expendables, everybody had their day in the sun in that movie. Like, they got to showcase whatever. And in this movie, well, I was just sorely disappointed in a lot of aspects, including the one you said. I think, like, probably my biggest disappointment was Jet Li, who's an Expendable original. You know, he was in the first movie, and we know Jet Li is a martial arts master. He's great to watch on screen when he's doing martial arts. Sorry, am I keeping you up again? The great rapport that we have together. No, but I just think that in the first movie he shined, and he had some great scenes, and then like great rapport with Dolph Lundgren and everything. And in this movie, he's in the movie for a whole of maybe 10 minutes, and he's sitting on the edge of a helicopter shooting a gun. No martial arts whatsoever. And it's like, why bother? Why not spend the money on somebody else? And why not like throw a line out and say that he's somewhere else? Like, if you're not going to use Jet Li and have him do martial arts and being a fight and maybe save the day for somebody, well, what's the point? And so that bothered me a lot. That was probably one of my biggest pet peeves in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, part of the problem, just kind of reading about it in general, again, everyone wants to sort of be a part of this movie's. It must be a scheduling nightmare. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why it stems from, you know, we're going to be doing Sin City, right? And you can have tons of actors like that in a movie like that because you're shooting them individually against a green screen and then matching up in scenes, and that's the magic of that. Whereas with this, you have to get very iconic people all in one place at the same time.
Right.
And literally the amount of casting changes that happen. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do I write a script if I don't know who's going to be in it? Because it has to sort of fit whoever it is. And like, oh, crap, that changed. Now we got to fix this. So I think its success is also what's hindering its progress.
And you bring up a really great point when you talk about the writing of the script. I believe that the first one, Stallone had his story mapped out, and there was a script, and he knew who he wanted to get into it. With this one, he woos this gentleman Patrick Hughes, who he became a fan of after his like first feature, which I believe is called Red Hill, and he loved what he saw. And again, I'm sure Patrick Hughes probably came cheap, you know, as like coming into this. He goes, but I really liked what you saw. I think you can handle Expendables 3. And he called him into his office, and there was no script. He goes, I want you to direct Expendables 3. And Patrick Hughes was like, okay, what's the hook? He goes, well, I want to have Mel Gibson as the bad guy. Oh, do we have Mel in it? No. What do you think about having Mel Gibson as the bad guy? And what's Patrick Hughes going to say? He's like, yeah, that'd be great. He goes, all right, I'll give him a call, tell him to be in the movie. They didn't even have a script when he hired Patrick Hughes to come in and say, you're going to direct this movie. And I really think it shows in this movie because, you know, he goes, I want him as the villain, and then I want to bring in these new recruits and everything. And so I think that there was so many characters that you're right. You can only do so much when you have a cast of a bazillion. Like I said, Robert Davi's in the movie for like literally 2 minutes. I think he hands Stallone a briefcase and then he gets shot. And, you know, when you look at who's the God, the actor, I already talked about him. He's in the beginning of the movie. He gets shot. And he carries the big gun. He has his day in the sun in the original Expendables. Hold on. No. I'll get it. I apologize for this. Terry Crews. Terry Crews, okay? All right, Terry Crews plays Caesar. He's a beloved character because he had that great scene in the first movie where he's carrying that cannon of a gun and he's mowing people down, you know? And in this scene, he sort of recreates that. He's on a boat and he gets shot. And I'm thinking to myself, and he gets shot like in the leg and he gets shot in the back by Mel Gibson. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this would be sort of kind of a twist and a surprise if one of our main guys gets killed. They are called the Expendables, yet nobody's been expended unless they don't want to work on the movie. Then they write them off like Church, Bruce Willis. But they don't kill anybody in these movies. So, you know, because he shows up at the end of the movie.
Well, that was interesting, too, because they had the idea of the dog tags.
Right.
And, you know, and we go to that, and, you know, that could have been a nice tie-in, you know, come full circle of all the people that we've lost.
Yeah, and at least it's a character that's beloved.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was the whole thing with Mel Gibson's character, story-wise. It's like, okay, he's one of the first, and this is what he's become, so we've lost him through this process. So it's that fine line, like, you're trying to add the sentiment of loss and what that fully means, but you're not capable of actually doing it.
No. And, you know,
putting the audience through it.
Yeah, and that was an issue, too, because if they are Expendables, at some point I would figure somebody... You know, I mean, believe it or not, I was actually thinking, I wonder when Stallone's going to, you know, maybe want to kill off Barney, and maybe then he can go back into the director's chair to direct the movie that he's not in, but I'm not sure if if he's willing to do that. But at least I thought the attempt was going to be there, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting twist. One of our characters is going to die. It doesn't happen. They bring in this young crowd.
Ronda Rousey, Victor Ortiz, Glen Powell. I'm trying to think of. I have the whole list in front of me, and yet it's all Kellan Lutz.
Kellan Lutz, yeah, who's the other one.
And I think that's it.
Yeah,
for the young guys.
And basically, to set this up, Barney's going on. This is a revenge movie, and I think this sort of kind of bothered me too because there wasn't a villain. There weren't any real stakes in this movie. Like, Mel Gibson's character was not holding the world for ransom or holding it, you know. He was buying some bombs and he killed one of the Expendables.
It could have been, then it becomes a different genre piece. And remember, it could have been more like a Western. You know, a man after a man, and you know, each has their own friends to back him up. And that would have been interesting. Ironically, they were trying to get Clint Eastwood into the movie, so that's one of the reasons why I actually did think of it. But that idea could have worked really well. Of like, okay, he was the first. Let's go after him.
Yeah, let's go after him.
And you betray the idea of betrayal.
Yeah, and which can be used as a great thematically. It's been used in a lot of movies, and it can be used to great accord and making good entertainment. Here, though, we had so Barney takes it upon himself to go after Mel Gibson. And he feels he doesn't want to put his team in any jeopardy because he knows it could be a one-way mission. Okay? So he more or less fires them. He breaks up the team. So then you start thinking about it, and a friend of mine brought this up. He's like, all right, so he doesn't want his core group of people, even though this is what they sign on for, he doesn't want them getting hurt and, or even worse, maybe getting killed.
I think it spoke to this age. I think it spoke to the age of like, you know what, this is ultimately a young man's job. I think maybe he was thinking that, and it's like, okay, you know, you guys have tested the fate so many times that, you know what, you guys came out on top, and you know what, now just do me a favor and just enjoy it. You know, we're having the beers. Just continue doing that. Yeah,
but yet they're the ones that he's most comfortable. So he goes, picks out these new bloods, these young, you know, fresh meat is basically because he didn't care whether they lived or died or not. So I mean, I'm going thinking, well, you had enough sympathy or empathy for your team because you didn't want them getting killed, but it's okay for you to bring in these kids who, like, let's face it, each in their own way or whatever, they were fine, but they didn't strike me as people that would really work well together. And where they may have been trained and have their expertise, he and Kelsey Grammer in a very long part in the middle.
I mean, that was
down.
part. You know, I don't think we needed, and I understood why we got it. You know, from their perspective, but story wise, that part definitely lagged because we could have recruited a lot faster.
We could have recruited and at least show them working together before they going on this all important mission where I didn't find any chemistry going on, and I'm like going, oh, so they're all set to take down this guy who, you know, started the Expendables, has experience in killing people, and yet, you know, these rookies are like Stallone, like Barney actually thought that these rookies could take down Mel Gibson, like that. I was having an issue with, you know, and then we got
athletic nightclub bound. I mean, that was amazing.
Yes, it was. I had
A
no
female
problem.
Nightclub
Bouncer. No, that was a great scene, and actually one of the funnier lines delivered in the movie because, you know, Stallone was like, you know, I could do that. He's like, yeah, you'd look really great. Kelsey Grammer, yeah, you'd look really great in that red dress or something like that. It was a funny line, but again, I just think that there wasn't enough chemistry. I didn't get to know these kids as much, and I didn't trust that they were going to get this job done. And I thought, oh, okay, they're like Liam Hemsworth character. They're all going to get killed. Instead of one in Expendables 2, now we're going to get 4 or 5 of these killed. And and guess what? We're bringing the gang all back together for more fun as we take down Mel Gibson, which eventually happens, minus the killing of the crew. You know, because we got that silly montage too of all of them looking forlorn. Randy Couture's at a bar moping in his beer. You know, we got Jason Statham watching Oprah or something on his TV, flicking with his knife. I mean, that montage too for me was like, oh good God, just let's get things moving again. Just get back together, please. Let something happen. And boy, did it happen towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, from a story perspective, it couldn't be more simpler almost.
It was extremely simple.
And you know, that's not a bad thing. You know, some of the best movies are the simplest ideas. People think they have to have there's always the hook. You have to have the hook. But you know what? There's Alexander Payne has made a living off non-hook movies, so to speak.
Sure.
You know, and having really be the beauty in, you know, through what's portrayed. And this could have been it.
And don't forget, the first one was a very simple. You know, the first Expendables is a very simple movie.
We're just going at it. It was a mansion,
right?
And it was very cost effective.
Right,
it was like all we could afford is just one mansion.
We got a mansion. There's a dictator who's really, 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 really bad to his people, and this agency wants to take him out. Yeah. You guys, we can't have any. You know, we can't be associated with this. We're calling you guys in to take care of the problem. You got to go in. Oh yeah, and there's a girl that's been kidnapped. We want her out. That was the movie. Boom. And very simple, but you got so much great action, great fight scenes, good gunfire, good camaraderie, good chemistry, and really good action. Where in this one, it's almost like I didn't know what the stakes were. I understand it's a revenge movie, but the bad guy, you know, Mel Gibson, who was good. I thought he was... Please, don't label me as anti-Semitic. He is a good actor, you know, and I understand, like, craziness aside, Mad Mel aside, it's good to see him back on screen. And he, you know, there was a little bit of Martin Riggs in him that I saw, and geez, you know, yeah, he had his bout of craziness and silliness. It was good to see him back in Expendables 3. I wish he was given a little bit more as a villain, and that there were more stakes, because I just didn't feel there was too much of a threat going on other than Stallone just wanted to take him out.
And how did you feel like Antonio Banderas? He just stole this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
think, you know, and especially for the women that watched it, I don't know like what the full breakdown was, but I know there's some women in my movie theater.
Same here.
That was their, like, it was all they were focused on was like, oh, Antonio Banderas.
And you know, it was the first time too that we've seen him in a movie in a little while where he got to be animated and he was front and center. And I agree. I think everybody else was sort of, I don't know. To me, the rest of the cast seemed to be a little bit subdued, and he's the one animated bright spot in the movie. Now, almost to the point of annoying because you're like, shut up already. But that was his purpose for being there. But he did have one moment, and you know, as much as I didn't like the movie, I can point out some certain scenes that I liked. And there was one moment where they were hiking on these rocks, this river or something, and Stallone says, "Oh, so-and-so and so-and-so were part of your crew, and they were killed." And Antonio Banderas, who's a motor mouth, just telling stories, stops and says, "Oh, you're actually listening." And Barney says, "Yes, I was listening." And Antonio's character goes, "Thank you." You know, because you know now you understand why he's talking so much. He's got all this guilt pent up inside him. His only way to get it out is to talk about these stories about these people who he was comrades with and fighting, and they didn't make it along with him. And it was a nice moment, and I'll give it that. Yeah.
It certainly was. I actually liked that moment too.
Yeah, and I thought that Antonio Banderas with Ronda Rousey.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they're fighting together. I actually thought that chemistry worked. Like I thought Ronda Rousey, she was relatively attractive and very surprising for a woman who's built up as such. Like she was really good in physical shape and everything. Her acting I thought was okay, but where she shined to me was her action with Antonio Banderas. Like that banter that they had going on, I was buying, and I was like, okay, this is fun. Like I get it, and I like it, and I liked the choreographing of that scene. I mean, the end there was so much going on. At the end.
What did you think? You know, I mean, with these movies, obviously it hinges on the action.
Mm-hmm.
How would you rate the action? Because especially like perhaps you want to make callbacks to previous movies, but then you also have something original, something that we haven't seen. You know, and you want to blow things up and things like that. And so, how would you rate the overall action?
Mixed bag for me. I liked the action in the first one a lot better. This one had some great scenes like we were talking about. I think that it was all over the map, but then there were certain parts of it where, again, like okay, so they're walking to this compound, right? Towards the end of the movie, where a lot of our action takes place, and there were fires outside and stuff. And my first thought was, okay, this is supposed to have been abandoned. Who lit those? Like, what's going on here? So then one thing happens, one thing leads to another. Mel Gibson says, okay, you guys are trapped. I've got this building wired with C4 all over the place. Okay, great. So now we got a ticking time bomb, and our heroes have to get out. But now a militia is coming in with tanks, and thank God they had motorcycles, and thank God one of our youngsters is a motocross expert, because wow, lo and behold, as I'm looking at the field, it looks like a track on the X Games. and so our guy can commandeer a motorcycle and go up jumps and ramps. That to me was silly. Then we go inside, and where the fighting was happening, my favorite part again was Antonio Banderas and
Ronda.
And Ronda, or her character's name is Luna. That was my favorite. Then you're outside with the helicopter. We didn't talk about Harrison Ford, and that to me,
We'll talk about Harrison Ford in a minute.
But it was Harrison Ford trying to. He was doing his best Roy Scheider in Blue Thunder. I mean, he's having his helicopter fly upside down, and is the waste of Schwarzenegger and Jet Li in that scene. It was just sort of kind of silly. And then we had, Stallone going after Mel Gibson. And again, maybe it's Stallone's limitations. I just was expecting more out of that.
I felt to me
at the end
that, as you're talking about, you're kind of half negating my point, but it felt like to me we had more money for explosions. And rather than good action sequences, we were just like, okay, where can we add an explosion? And to me, it was very evident when when they land with the helicopter, and I think it's with Wesley Snipes, I believe, it's somewhere in the very beginning. And there's a great song, "Cool Guys Don't Look Back at Explosions." And Stallone just blows up that helicopter. The other guy looks around, but Stallone
just keeps walking.
"Cool Guys Don't Look at Explosions," and just walks off camera. And it was like, well, why did he need to? I guess he needed to blow up the plane so he could cover his tracks. But did we really need to blow up the helicopter?
Yeah, he needed to make it rain. Wesley Snipes. We didn't talk about him, and again, it was good. I mean, I thought it was good to see Wesley back on screen again, and even
from tax evasion.
From tax evasion, yeah, that's they were breaking him out of prison or a prison transfer. The train scene was okay, but it made me because again, another person I haven't seen on the silver screen in a very long time. And I go, God, this guy was co-starring with like Sean Connery back in the day. Passenger 57. I mean, this guy could Blade. Like, this guy could handle action. And I was happy to be reminded of the former Wesley Snipes because he was good at it. And, he had a couple of scenes here that he was good at. And it also was like, oh, yeah, he and Stallone were in Demolition Man together. Where they had to fight each other at the, and so it was good to see him back. Maybe he can do another movie outside of, a Stallone flick. I enjoyed seeing him. He had some decent scenes. He and Jason Statham's character, Christmas, they had some banter that was okay. So, he didn't bore me or anything. He was a good addition to the crew.
Speaking of Harrison Ford, I thought for his role he did a good job, only because when I think of Harrison Ford, I don't always look at him as like an action hero, right? Whereas Indiana Jones was sort of action, but it wasn't action like these other guys, and so it's nice where he's kind of beyond that. He's sort of overlooking the action rather than being a full part of the action. Also, what was the sci-fi movie that came out? Ender's Game, right? He's that same type of way, and so it just I thought it fit with kind of overall Harrison's persona of what he's become.
Well, you do bring up a good point because he wasn't an action star of the ilk of Schwarzenegger, Willis, Stallone. He's
Star Wars, great, but not an action hero.
But he's an actor. And he's a very, very good actor. And he's been around. And, fortunately for Mr. Ford, he has been able to tackle. You can maybe argue 3, but at the very most, 2 of the most iconic on-screen personas ever to be filmed. Han Solo, Indiana Jones. Some people might argue Rick Deckard from Blade Runner, which is, grown in its cult status. But let us not forget, the guy was also in Witness, Mosquito Coast,
American Graffiti.
Air Force One is an action movie. Wolfgang Peterson directed action flick. That's a really good. He plays the president. Harrison Ford was great in the day where you believed in the man, and he can almost be very Bogart-ish. Humphrey Bogart, like he could play off an everyman. Working Girl. Like, he could be in a movie like Working Girl, which is sort of kind of like a romantic comedy kind of a movie, Sabrina. But then, unfortunately for him, he wanted to do something different, and maybe he was being ill-advised, and he was in the Robert Zemeckis. It was a horror thriller called What Lies Beneath.
I remember that one.
Okay, and that one sort of kind of torpedoed his career for a very long time. Oh, and let us not forget, movies like The Fugitive, which is an action movie. Then he does a movie like Presumed Innocent. I mean, Ford has been in a bunch of movies that are they could be thrillers, dramas. He could play it all. So, no, he was, to me, seeing Harrison Ford in this kind of a movie, I was like, oh, why? You were never of that ilk. Like, I always think, and I still do, I always think so much more about Harrison Ford. Yes, he's been in some clunkers, 6 Days, 7 Nights.
That movie gets repeated so many times, though.
Oh my God, it's crazy. And that movie, the movie made with Ron Shelton that had brain fart again. The kid from Pearl Harbor, who's on not Cuba Gooden. No, he's in Pennywise or Penny Dreadful right now. Yeah, and he's in Pearl Harbor. I'll look him up.
We'll post it in the comments.
But that was another bad. He was in a like he couldn't find a good project. He couldn't pay to be in a good movie. So, now he's starting to get his, trying to get his career back on track. We could argue till end of days about Indiana Jones and Crystal Skull. Personally, I mean, to me, it was. I wanted to see, Harrison Ford don the fedora and the leather jacket. He's going to be in the new Star Wars movie. I don't think he needed to be in Expendables 3. Maybe he needed the paycheck. I don't know. Maybe he thought that this was going to be a good stepping stone for him. You could have found somebody else. I just think so much more of him. But hey, he has a sense of humor. He did it. But I think, like I said, he was channeling Roy Scheider in the great helicopter movie directed by John Badham, Blue Thunder.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, they approached him to do the movie. Also, Nicolas Cage was approached to do the movie. I mean, we can go down this entire list of people approached to do the movie. Chuck Norris was approached again. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
right.
Let's see who else was kind of in the midst of Mila Jovovich. She was in negotiations. I think she would have played Ronda Rousey's character had that happened. That's all the notables.
Yeah, I mean, and again, to your point, I think that Stallone was maybe biting off more than they could chew. Listen, if the characters are meant to be quote unquote expendable, like, maybe some of them should die so that you can bring in new blood. Or old blood as it be. But you can, this way your cast doesn't get so big that you have to make the poster letterboxed instead of a regular size poster, and people can work with one another, have scenes with everybody, and yet have a scene in which they get to shine.
Meaningful.
Right.
Yeah.
And I found that hard in this movie at a lot of times. So, and I'm still trying to look up, I don't know why, Josh Hartnett. Josh Hartnett was the person that Harrison Ford starred in. Hollywood, I don't want to call it Hollywood Homicide. Another, So, again, I know he's making a comeback. Can't wait to see him as Han Solo again. He's given us so much entertainment through the years that to see him in an as soon as he signed for an Expendables 3, I was like, oh, Harrison, why are you doing this?
Well,
He's never of that ilk.
Well, if they had he approached them, it would be a completely different thing. They approached him and they wanted him, so it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So some
other stuff to talk about. We'll talk about Piracy, but let's talk about the rating.
Yeah, that's another thing.
So I know this is very near and dear to your heart. Where the first couple they were R-rated movies. Now we're getting PG-13. Perhaps by adding in so many younger kids, we're trying to open it up to younger kids just in general, audience wise.
Well, they wanted to make Expendables 2 PG-13. There was a big deal, and part of that was, according to the rumors or what you read, Chuck Norris, who is like born again, or he's found religion, and he didn't want to be he didn't want to be in a violent movie or whatnot, and have lots of language, and they were going to make Expendables 2. It got out really early, PG-13, and there was a lot of backlash on that. Let's before we get into Expendables 3, let's look at a little bit of history of our three main characters, our three main actors: Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis. First Blood, Rambo movies, rated R. You look at Bruce Willis with Die Hard, rated R. You look at Schwarzenegger, Terminator, T2, True Lies, all rated R movies. Total Recall, a heavy rated R movie. And they're all Predator, rated R movie. All of these movies back in the 80s, going into the 90s, you know, they were great action movies, but they didn't shy away from the violence. And they were the type of violence that, you know, for
It was absurd.
It was absurd, but you got behind it. It was like, yeah, when they take out a bad guy, there was something behind it. And when you're doing the Expendables, if you're going to do a throwback movie, you have to shoot for the R rate. You have to go that route. That's what people are going to expect. They're going to expect, you know, a cheesy line after something happens, but, you know, this ain't James Bond action. This is full-on rated R action. And I think that's why, again, Expendables really works. Expendables 2, there was fan outrage. They made it, it was rated R. Now, people could argue, well, it didn't make as much as Expendables did, and it was a rated R movie. Maybe if it was PG-13, I just think it wasn't as good of a movie. This movie, they didn't make much of a big deal. They sort of kind of snuck it in that this was going to be PG-13, and they held off on the rating for a long time. And, yeah, I mean, I think that the rating on this movie hurt. And, you know, they wanted to make it family-friendly, but in what bizarro world am I living in where The Expendables was ever meant to be family-friendly? I'm not taking a 12-year-old to go see The Expendables movie. I'll take them to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe, but not Expendables. It was never meant for the family-going movie audience. And it's funny because the New York Times did an article, and Forbes actually had a great article about this where it says PG-13, not piracy, killed Expendables 3. And they had some really interesting statistics for Expendables 3. 66% of the audience was male, 25 or older. That's 66% of the audience. So right there, you're like, well, then why would you make it PG-13? Now, I had conversations with a friend of mine, Greg, who lives in Denver. I had a conversation with him. I told him that I saw Expendables 3. He goes, oh, don't even want to talk about it. Not going to see it. PG-13. And I was like, well, I'm not going to argue with that because I was one of those people who, you know, hated it when they talked about it Expendables 2. You can't turn your back on your core fan base, even the, you know, if you want the nostalgia people coming back in. And to me, I don't know how it got. Maybe they took out a lot of blood, but there was as much killing.
Yeah, I didn't really notice how it was PG-13 at all. It could have been R-rated to me.
It could have been R-rated, yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
I mean, they must have fought like hell with the PG, with the MPAA.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, that was as close to being an R-rated movie as far as violent content goes. The only thing that was missing, I guess, was the arterial CGI blood spray with every gunshot. I mean, what was your thought? Like, when you were going into a PG-13 Expendables movie, what were you thinking?
You know, it just... Because it misses, you know, you mentioned Predator and things like that. There's a terror element to those. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's not just the violence, but it's also the tone and the terror. And you had mentioned already that the stakes weren't as big. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why they didn't feel as big, because I don't know, it just lacks that raw primal emotion of, you know, in this case, to make revenge you need anger, and it perhaps lacks some of that anger because it's like, okay, well, you know, trust me, I've seen the notes from the MPA. It could have been like, okay, tone down on the anger. Right. Okay, this scene had like, okay, so it could have been that.
I don't know. All I can say is just using, again, I understand there is this great thought out there that if you make a PG-13 movie, you'll get more people to come. Now, we talked about Lucy. Lucy was a huge hit. That movie was rated R. Okay, mm-hmm. Now I would say there was as much violence in Expendables 3 as there was in Lucy. Yeah. Okay, the only thing that was missing in Expendables 3 was swearing. God, did somebody say... There might have been one fuck in Expendables 3.
You're allowed
one F word. There was no nudity, you know, whatsoever. Shitload of people getting shot, like you know, just mowed down. But again, just going back on the rated R thing, you know, we did have movies like Lockout, White House Down, Columbiana. You know, all these movies were rated R, and they did like some really big business. And you could argue, that there were other movies that were rated R that didn't do as well. Schwarzenegger's Last Stand, I believe, was rated R. Bullet to the Head, which was Stallone's movie. And this is another thing that we can talk about too. Those movies were rated R. They didn't really do a whole hell of a lot. But PG-13 doesn't necessarily help a movie. Maybe in the case of a Guardians of the Galaxy, they could have shot the movie, and in the end of the day, it could have been rated R. And I can understand Disney saying, hey, this is a Marvel movie, we got to tone it down, do whatever. So I understand in those cases, but in a movie like Expendables, you got to go full R on that. You can't shy away from that. You can't shy away from the audience. I do think that the PG-13, along with the Piracy in conjunction, I think it hurt. I think it hurt more than it helped. It didn't bring in the young audience. Don't forget, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles still playing. It was the #1 movie again that weekend. You still had Guardians of the Galaxy, which also beat out the Expendables. Very popular PG-13 movie. Why not? And again,
And you were going up against The Giver.
The Giver, right? And
which was aimed towards that audience. Not that it did much better, but...
And I have to talk, because I worked at Lionsgate, it was the rated R movie that brought Lionsgate to where they were. They built their house on Jigsaw. They were rated R movies. Even some of the Dane Cook movies, the comedies, were rated R movies. And then to shy away from your history and what brought you to where you are, that was sort of disappointing. And I think I do agree with this Forbes article that does say that, I think the guy said the PG-13 rating hurt in conjunction with Piracy, but probably did way more harm than good for them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. It could have been better.
Yeah.
And it just, so I did feel there was a lack of action.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have been that. And I do think that they filmed a lot of it. Only because you also never know how the MPAA is going to take it, so you film more than, and then you try to sneak it in as best you can.
You do. You do, and then but you make your concessions. You can make your concessions as well. Yeah. You can. This has been done through the history of filming movies. Steven Spielberg did it with Jaws. Martin Scorsese has done it a bunch of times. He's gone on record saying, I specifically put in a scene that's overly violent so that I can get this scene shot the way that I want it to be shot. So, it's very, it's a game with the MPAA and what you can get around. And again, coming from Lionsgate, the problems that studio suffered while I was there with the MPAA is stuff that you can write books about. I mean, there were battle circles just to make a trailer or to get a poster. To be up on screen, right? That's
the other thing people don't know. They have to approve everything. It's not just the movie, it's the posters, it's the trailers, it's all that.
Yeah, folks, anytime you're in a movie theater, whatever you see inside a movie theater, in one way, shape, or form, the MPAA had to take a look at it and give it its approval. Whether it's a poster, whether it's a trailer, whatever, it has to be approved to go up. And trust me, at the times that I was at Lionsgate, we lost many a battle.
Yeah.
Now,
in terms of the marketing, you look at the marketing of this, and there's so much behind it. They did Comic-Con.
Sure.
Obviously, their whole scheme has always been, okay, action, stars,
right.
And those two. They also a lot of the trailers were released right around the time of speaking of international fame, right around the World Cup.
Sure.
No better place to mark. Who's watching for the most part the World Cup? Dudes.
Yeah, and well, the other thing, their huge splash was the Cannes Film Festival. Mm-hmm. When you talk about an international market, and these people are, in their own right, international box office gods to a lot of these people. They literally drove tanks down the main street of Cannes, in which each tank was showcasing one of the stars of the Expendables. Literally, they were in tanks. So it was a huge event to kick off the marketing campaign. And listen, my one misfire about the marketing on this movie, because you were right, you got to talk about the stars. But to me, if you looked at some of the banners, the theatrical stuff and some of the stuff that was online, they were taking pictures and they were like all smiling and they were like all dressed up and they were posing like they were on the cover of GQ. That's not what I want in an Expendables movie. Yeah. Like, I'm like, what the hell are they thinking? Like, this isn't like, who are you marketing to? Because I don't want to see like Terry. I don't want to see them like, mid laugh like they just got the joke and dressed well. And I don't want it to look like a GQ.
Yeah, you want it to look army
I
pants.
want them to be, yeah. I want them to be tough guys. And your marketing. Think of something. Think of a tagline. Think of something that goes with Expendables 3. The trailers were fine. I just thought that the print was very lacking on this one. Too GQ and not enough FU.
Yeah.
So,
well, as Stone Cold said, the working man. This one's for the working man. And that's what
yeah, the working man really reads GQ. I don't read GQ.
Well, this
I'm a
movie is
schmuck.
made for the working man.
Sure. Yeah. And
No, that's 'cause,
no,
yeah.
I agree. And
Someone who likes to have a beer on a Friday
right?
night and like, all right, let's have a good
Absolutely.
time.
And let's watch a guy's film, and that's what The Expendables was, and that's what a lot of those earlier movies in the 80s. But that's the other thing too. Our cultures have changed so much. I mean, those guys could bring women in too, because women found them attractive. They liked the dangerous man, and it's not so much the case anymore. And I think they put an effort in Expendables, because you talk about Jason Statham's character Christmas,
Yeah.
who in Expendables, you could argue he's sort of kind of like the lead, like he's a main focal point, and he's the only one of the characters where he has a girlfriend and he's trying to keep this relationship going. And I think that was a concerted effort, and you could argue whether it worked or not to maybe get the females in there because there was a little bit of a relationship and he was chivalrous and stuff. But Charisma Carpenter's character's like right out the window and like non-existent. I don't even remember. I don't even know if in part 2 they even mentioned what may or may. I think she was in part 2 at the very end of the movie. In this movie, she's not even mentioned.
Yeah, no,
at all. Mickey Rourke was missing in this movie too.
He was going to come back, actually.
Yeah, I missed his presence in this movie. But when you have so many people, it's hard. It's got to be tough.
Now, even tough. Again, you kind of negated the point, but obviously the studio is going to make a huge point of this and just blame everything on that, is the piracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many times this has happened, but a DVD quality leak.
Yeah, that's.
'Cause I remember when Wolverine got leaked.
Yeah.
But that was half the green screen was missing and all that stuff, and this
that they were able to track down. They arrested the guy for that.
Yeah.
This was a DVD. This was like, it was like a screener that somehow got out. You could sue and point fingers. I got to go to the source. And my question is, why, if there was a screener, and I don't know the full history because it really hasn't come out, like if it was a screener, for the sake of this conversation, why wouldn't you watermark it? I mean, for those who don't, there's a screener.
The watermark is annoying, which is why it works.
But not only is it annoying, for those who don't, there's usually screeners made for almost every movie. Rest assured, Bob Iger, while he may see a lot of Star Wars on a big screen or whatever, rest assured there's going to be some of it he sees as a screener, and it will be watermarked with his name on it in one way, shape, or form. Watermarking a DVD or a screener, basically today, with the technology that we have, they can encode that DVD so that it has a person's name, so they know that this screener was given to this person, so that if it ever goes out, they know at least from what camp it came out of.
Yeah.
Okay. This is supposed to be a relatively important franchise for a company. I don't understand, if it was a screener, how a screener gets out and it's not security coded and watermarked, so that they can at least know, where was it? Whose desk was it taken off of? I'm not saying that anybody wanted to purposely let this out, But when you have that kind of security on it, and granted, I understand that it costs more. Rest assured, Lionsgate will not be putting any Hunger Games screeners out that are not security watermarked. And how it happened for the Expendables, I have no idea. But that's a big problem. But according to the New York Times, it's really interesting because they had a great movie or a great article. Expendables 3 fumbles in its mission. And it talks about the piracy. And here's the interesting thing. According to the New York Times, most of the illicit viewing was happening overseas. Experts estimate that the movie, which cost at least $90 million to make, $30 million to market, was downloaded 500,000 times in the United States and Canada. Okay? So thank God the article's here because I suck at math. So if each downloaded equaled a lost opening weekend ticket purchase, the leak would have cost Lionsgate, and they're going off an average ticket price of $8.15 North American ticket price. Lionsgate would have cost roughly $4 million. So if you add that to the 16 that it made, so that would have brought that total up to 20. So again, was piracy that much of an issue? Because going into the weekend, like that week leading up, people were thinking anywhere between 25 and 30. Yeah. And even with the 4, you're still going to be shy $5 to $10 million off. So in other words, the poor performance of Expendables 3 can't necessarily be blamed on the piracy. It's what we're
It's just
talking
one of
about
those
before.
things. It doesn't help.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help. And, you know, I think what they're waiting for now, too, because overseas, man, piracy overseas is a killer. Because, you know, it's the reason why we just recently started exchanging movies with China because they had such a piracy issue. There was no way we wanted to support that kind of economy, that piracy economy. They've tightened down, but overseas, you know, piracy, these actors are so big that if it's out pirated, you know, people, because they're so popular, they'll go for the pirated copy. I mean, and again, it goes down to, do you want to pay $10, $12 for a ticket, for an adult ticket overseas? Or do you want to see it for free? Oh, and it's got Stallone and Schwarzenegger in it. You know, it could have big ramifications overseas for them, which would, you know, that doesn't help. That doesn't help either. And I don't know what they think about ratings overseas, if they pay attention as much as we do, but it could have an impact on that foreign box office for Expendables 3. Which is too bad, you know. I hope that when it's found out what happens, Lionsgate needs to take they need to take the serious measure, and much like Fox did, they need to make an example. You know, it could have been, you know, this is you're toying with people's livelihood. Look, Stallone and them, they have back end points. That's where it's going to affect. But for the most part, everybody who worked in the movie got paid for the services rendered. It's the studio that's taking a hit, because now this is going to affect their internet or their Blu-ray sales, their VOD sales. You know, it's going to affect. It's going to have ripple effects. So, you know, I just hope that going on down the line that they can find out where this happened. And they should make it public. Hey, we found out what happened. This is what happened. And, you know, so they make people aware of the seriousness of what piracy is and it can mean to our business. Yeah. So it's very serious. So,
all right. What else do you want to talk about with this movie? I know we don't necessarily talk story too much. We talked a lot about the cast and everything else, but I always feel like with this, the stories, there's not a lot with the story. There's just a richness to the outside stuff.
Well, we know that the movie was about $125 million. They don't have necessarily, you know, total all in. Now, again, you know, domestically, opening weekend was 15.8. It wasn't number one at the box office.
Which, but we were guessing which movie was going to retain. It was the Turtles.
It was the Turtles. Yeah. So, you know, and then you have thus far estimated it's about 21 million all in. Worldwide gross estimated about 27, which isn't that much of a disparity when you think about it. Now, the Rotten Tomato rating as of yesterday was at 35%. That's not fresh at all. But here's what's weird: the Cinema Score rating was an A minus. I want to know where they got an A minus from. I mean, I wouldn't come even close to giving this movie an A minus. It must have been the 12-year-olds. They must have sampled
Maybe
the 50 12-year-olds that the PG-13 rating.
I know a lot of people that went that just absolutely enjoyed it, which is good to hear. So the fans that I know of enjoyed it, is what I can say with safety.
Yeah,
can I say that for everybody? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that it got an A minus, and you would think that could perpetuate, your further weeks into the run.
I mean, editing wise and all that, I thought it was I thought for the movie that it was slightly too long. It literally should have been an hour 40 minutes, hour 45. That's
Agreed. Yeah, we didn't need this. This was, of the three, this is the longest movie. It clocks in at about 2 hours, 2 hours and 2 minutes. That middle part, man, could have moved a lot quicker for me. I mean, I just wanted to get back to our core characters, because, no offense, the kids weren't given enough time to gel and to work together, where I actually got to know them. And who knows, maybe I could have had some compassion for them, but right from the get-go, you knew that you knew something bad was going to happen. Because why else would you bring them in, and how else are you going to get our core group back other than to save these kids? So
and then part of it was knowing that it was just going to be a joke of hey, the old guy still got it,
right. Right.
You kids think you know everything.
Yeah, and then at the end, of course, everybody's all lovey-dovey and, oh yeah, you're right, and yes, and oh, I respect you as a young, and I respect you. I can learn a lot from you, and I don't know. It was just silly. Now, there was one other controversy that we haven't brought up yet. And this was...
Do I know this one?
Well, okay. This one sort of took me by surprise. The end of the movie. Do you remember, they're in a bar, joking around again, right? Okay.
I remember that scene.
Okay. So, as part of Jet Li's 10 minutes in the movie, he's with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mm-hmm. And they looked to me like they were either on roofies and a lot of alcohol. Okay. And Stallone at one point even says, "Get a room." So I couldn't even understand what Schwarzenegger
it was, to me, it was just a throwaway line.
But Expendables
it's just guys' humor of oh, you two, get a room.
International Business Times, Expendables 3 director Patrick Hughes reveals 2 gay lovers in the film. And then he goes on to say, according to Australian, features 2 gay characters in love with each other, according to Australian director Patrick Hughes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but where the fuck does that come from? I mean, I see 2 movies before. There was no chemistry. You gotta sort of kind of lead into that if that's where you want to go. And this just shows up literally as a throwaway. It's a literal throwaway. And Schwarzenegger literally seemed drunk. I couldn't understand a word he said. And Jet Li with it, I couldn't understand. I was like, what the? That was a very awkward scene to me. But apparently now we have 2 gay characters in the Expendables.
I don't think that's making it into the 4th. I don't think that's going to be a crossover.
Cross-dressing? No? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's.
But what does it add? What does it change? Are you just trying to make press for the movie? What? Because obviously that's a big headline.
It's a headline, and I didn't know where it came from. I didn't understand. It was an awkward moment in the movie, and at first I just thought that they were joking around. I didn't and now and then when I was doing research on the movie, I come up across, and this wasn't the only place where I've seen this. If you Google this, making of Expendables,
how does Arnold and Jet Li say about this? Because I don't know how they feel about this, and especially Arnold, and because I know in particular it would. Right, with sports,
right,
or anything like that. If you're supposedly strong, not that this is right, but it's very controversial to be supposed muscle man and things like that, and then to be considered gay. It's and so not that it's right, but it's like right off the bat, it's like, what? No, I'm not. No, and that used to be the big thing. No,
Right.
I'm not.
Right,
No,
right.
I'm not gay. And again, it's not right, but that's just what the case was for many years. And now, obviously, more athletes and things like that are coming out. But you don't need this.
You don't need it. And again, there was nothing in the first. Like, if you were gonna go, like, if you had a plan. And again, this is my problem. Hey, I'm hiring you as a director. Oh, great. What am I doing? You're doing Expendables 4. Oh, that's awesome. Can I see a script? Oh, no, we don't have that yet. But this is who I want to cast in the movie.
And they might be gay.
Yeah, but instead of, if you had a roadmap and you were going to make a trilogy, you say, okay, so I have these characters here, and by the time I get to the third movie, this is where I'm going to be. So there was no roadmap. And so this comes out of nothing. And then again, in the final setting of the film, and again, the only person who's really saying something is Patrick Hughes. Yeah. There doesn't seem any, like, it's are the two just ribbing Ross, or are they really together? And Hughes says, I believe they are, hinting that he just got away with incorporating gay characters in love in the testosterone-packed film. So that's it. Like, he's the only one that seems to be saying things.
I think if anything, right? I think they're making fun of a thing. That's I think they're making fun of girly man.
Girly.
I think they're making fun of that.
Yeah, I think
that's the only thing they're making fun of.
That makes more sense, and I'd buy that, other than just throwing this in, just to say, hey, we got gay characters in the Expendables, and I'm like, okay, where did it come from? Like.
Because then, okay, here's the thing. Not that this is the right mentality and whatever, but then guess what? You've now, if this does become big news and things like that, this is another thing that could potentially hurt numbers, because then you have, and especially internationally, where racism and all that is still way more prevalent. Not that it isn't prevalent in America.
Yeah, unfortunately,
and you have to acknowledge that.
Right.
So all of a sudden now, anyone who might have gone seeing the movie, like, whoa.
Right. The working class. Well, yeah. I don't want it. Right. Or
no,
anybody.
I see men's movies. I'm not seeing that.
I'm not buying Schwartz. Yeah. No, listen. Leave it to your interpretation. This came up a lot in my research. I found it interesting. And thus far, I mean, we're probably the only movie podcast that's talking about this openly. So
no pun intended.
No pun intended. But I think it's important to note, and it was just an interesting take on something that that was not my initial way of thinking what the hell was going on in that scene, and
it's just irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
It doesn't. If they are, they are. But they're whatever. Who can't? I don't.
Oh, and did you also know that Jason? Here's something sort of interesting too. Jason Statham almost died making this movie. Did you know that? In a scene where he's driving a truck, he's driving the truck, and he went to hit the brakes. In this scene, the brakes didn't work. He literally drove off the road through a railing into water, and he almost drowned. Wow. Like, yeah, he was on Good Morning America talking about that story, and again. You go back, like Stallone doesn't.
How many days into filming? How did it affect his psyche? Did he mention that?
He talked about how it affected him in the sense that he literally thought he was gonna buy it, and he's done like underwater stuff and he's used to doing his own stunts, but he says that this totally woke me up. I may have a different take on how to do things. Like nobody planned on this happening, and God, could you imagine that tragedy?
Yeah.
Knock on wood that it, thankfully it didn't. But, while filming in Bulgaria, Jason Statham almost drowned making this movie. So it goes to, there is a bit of commitment to the fact of, I don't want to use a stunt double and whatnot. And Stallone most certainly drew from that in the first movie. By the way, if you have the first Expendables movie, on Blu-ray and or DVD, there is an amazing documentary that Stallone took time to put together, and I believe it's called Inferno. It's on the DVD and or Blu-ray. I would watch it. If you're a fan of these movies, you can totally see the passion and the fire behind why Stallone wanted to make the movie and how he almost died in the process. I mean, he almost has Rocky syndrome. He was doing, outside of writing and directing and putting this cast together, he took a lot of punches to the head. And the doctor said, hey, you get any more concussions like that, that's it. You'll be a vegetable. And he had to really, and I sort of kind of noticed that in these movies as well. In
He's
2
taking a
and
step
3.
back.
Seems to be like his fight with Mel Gibson. Look, you watch that fight in the first Expendables movies. That's an intense fight. The one he has with Mel Gibson at the end of this one, it's okay. It's not like great. You sort of kind of, I don't know. He seems very tired, and maybe they're not. When you look at these movies that they've come out with since Expendables, they've each tried to go on and make, like, Stallone did Bullet to the Head. Schwarzenegger did Last Stand. Those movies didn't work. They did Escape Plan together. That movie didn't work. And I was watching Escape Plan the other day, and for me, part of it was they're not picking. Escape Plan didn't necessarily get it. Escape Plan, like, is not what a Total Recall is. You got to watch those movies and appreciate. Like, they weren't hits because they sucked. They were hits because they were actually good action movies that brought in a bunch of audience, and it brought over a good crossover. Like, they were a good, at the time, they were a good date night movie. Like, Die Hard it's a great action movie, right? I mean, True Lies is a really great, and when you even look at Predator, you could say that there's not, all right, Predator's a very testosterone-driven movie. I'm not sure how many women that would be their first choice, but you could see at the height of his career that Schwarzenegger, how Predator worked. Yeah. They're not having that success, and they seem to be grabbing for it now with Expendables. I think maybe they should stop with this one. And the greatest news that came out this week, because Stallone wants to do an offshoot and call it the Expendables, and his first reaching out was to Sigourney Weaver, who again I look up to as a great actress. Whether regardless of she's been in a lot of great action movies. She thankfully passed, and she's going to be doing Avatar movies, for about 50 years. So, but I was just like, thank you. I mean, and didn't we already get our Expendables? We got Bad Girls that had Drew Barrymore.
What was there was one called Red or something.
I'm sorry, what?
There was Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch was all the girls. My guilty pleasure. It's a guilty pleasure for me.
But what's the old guy movie one where they're like spies?
Red.
Yeah, Red. Yeah, Red. Okay, cool. So it is Red.
Yeah. So that's the only thing that the music was done by our good. It was done by Brian Taylor, who seems to be getting all the work these days. Yeah. He did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, 2 movies and basically a week apart.
Yeah, so he did Into the Storm, which I was the only one of this team that saw that, and I didn't even get to talk about.
It made you angry. So go ahead, say it. Go ahead, say it before we wrap this up.
That Into the Storm made me angry.
There you go. So you got 2 movie reviews in one. All right, guys. Thank you guys for joining us for another Anatomy of a Movie.
I hope they enjoy the breakdown. I hope we didn't come across as just like. I hope they enjoyed what we brought to this, because I think it's important. There's a lot more other than just dislike for the movie. There's so much more to talk about.
There's a passion. The reason why if we came off in the way, it's because there's a passion for these movies. There's such a, let us know what your guys' history with these action stars is. And that's part of the reason why we love it. And inevitably something's going to be upsetting, and whether it's good or bad.
Sure.
Because of your, everyone's interpretation and perception and who you like. Yeah, I mean, it could come down to the simplest thing of like, this person wasn't enough more because that's the person you hold near and dear to your heart versus someone else. And
sure.
It's just the way it is. And so I want to know your guys' thoughts. At the end of the day, you know what? I appreciate these movies for what they do, what they've attempted, and just the fact that they're out there,
Sure.
It's revitalized many things, and I hope it continues, and it just gets better and better.
I like going back to my Blu-ray collection and just picking out our First Blood Part 2, written by James Cameron, by the way. Things like that. I love the Expendables. a lot, and I think you can really see its heart and soul in what's the Stallone. Stallone went in it with the best intentions, and you can never fault a person who goes into something, an art project like that, with the best intentions.
And with the best intentions, please tweet at Demetri for the third weekend in a row. What is your Twitter?
At DMovies1701. That's at DMovies1701. I'm trying to break that 20 barrier, and half of that 20 I think are just ad people just following me for whatever reason. I don't know who they
That's
are.
exactly what the fans are going to do. They'll follow you just for any reason.
Well, I want the fans to follow me, and please, at DMovies1701. My tweets, I try to relegate them to movies only. I did one sport comment earlier this week.
That's why you lost some followers.
That's probably it, but I do like to keep it movies relegated. I almost did a supernatural one, but I X'd it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Follow us on Twitter at Movie Anatomy. For more dissections, go to anatomymovie.com. The Schmoes Know did a great interview with Victor Ortiz from this movie. So definitely check that out. We're partnering in the movie space, so they're good friends of ours. We're good friends of theirs. We'll be back with... We just did The Giver. Past week we did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and something else I can't... Or we did the Robin Williams tribute.
Most Wanted Man. We did Lucy, Guardians of the Galaxy.
We've got coming up Sin City, A Dame to Kill For.
Can't
oh my
wait.
goodness.
Can't wait.
This is going to be fun. We've got good movies coming up, and we are working on more and more special guests, so definitely check that out. Comment below. Let us know what you guys thought of this movie. Let us know what you guys want covered more. We love the discussion. I have to give a huge shout out. The movie that just continues on and on, Under the Skin.
Under the Skin. It is incredible.
This movie has pretty much made it an anatomy movie. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.